what a dummy!
Welcome back to the Fantasy Rugby Draft podcast. Thanks for downloading and listening. Joining me in the booth to Reboot Fantasy Rugby Draft is Roux and Gys. How are you guys?
Very well. Thank you, Brucey.
I'm good, Bruce. I'm just glad to be back.
Excellent.
With you guys.
Excellent. And also joining me in the booth to chat all things Six Nations is our Six Nations correspondent, our go-to, our bat signal, if you will, Russ Milsom from the Maulover Podcast. How's you, Russ?
I'm really well, Bruce. It's great to see FRD coming back online. I'm really looking forward to it.
Excellent. Yeah, it's been a bit of a ride. You can follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Rug Draft. That's Fantasy RUG Draft. We've also got a bit of an increased presence on IG there, so go and have a look at us there. On the agenda tonight, we're going to discuss some changes that we've got with FRD, both with the product and a couple of structural changes we've made, org changes that we've made, and then we'll get into what you really come for, to look at the Six Nations, look at the squads, and get prepared for your drafts. So just on that on the first point, so at a personal level, we're pretty gutted we couldn't get a Prem Rugby or Champions Cup comp off the ground last year. We've always faced some pretty difficult challenges with costs and time and money to run these types of competitions, and we just ran out of steam the end of last year. So in the last few months, we've been kind of working to solve these. We're pretty stoked to announce that one of our best Super Rugby FRD leagues, the BNB League, has answered the call to partner with us to run FRD. So really, really pumped with that. So Roux is here repping the BNB League today, as well as Gys. Tell us a bit about the lads and a bit about the BNB League, mate.
Oh, Bruce, thank you so much. Thanks for the intro. We're happy to be here. No, Bruce, so we started playing Fantasy Rugby Draft back in 2014. We were still at university. Exactly, it was as if it was in destiny. 10 friends of us that wanted to play Fantasy Rugby, and we used to play Fox Sport, and then after 4 weeks, all of us have got the same team, and then we stopped playing halfway, and we said, nah, we're over this. So Gys somehow got hold of Fantasy Rugby Draft, and we decided, no, this is one that we wanted to play. So we've been playing since 2014. We absolutely love it, to the point that we get together twice a year for draft weekend and finals weekend, where we get all of the mates in just to have the boys together to do a draft online, but all together in a war room or a command room, and we do it from there. Been fantastic going so far. We pretty much spread out. Some of us have been overseas in the US. Most of us are based in South Africa, but the rest are in Namibia and in some faraway places such as Durban. And we've even reached the point where we even put money together to pay each other's flights just so they can be there for the weekend. So we really love Fantasy Rugby Draft. It was for us absolutely a heart-shattering moment last year when we started picking up that things were looking a bit tough. We were following the Twitter, the Facebook, and all of that. So then, as all of us get together and, all great ideas start. It was over a couple of beers around a fire one night, and we said, but why don't we just start our own fantasy league? I mean, if things are going tough, then we can do it ourselves, So I think we made one Excel spreadsheet and tried to put all the names together. We realized, what the hell are we doing? There's no way that we can do this. So Gys then had that idea. So why don't we just reach out to Bruce and see maybe we can help you? And you just mentioned that we missed Premiership Rugby and we missed the Champions Cup. But, our holidays are in December. If it was only in July or a bit early in the year, then we might have been a bit up in the line with this. But, so for us, we're just happy to play Fantasy Rugby Draft to the point that we're willing to buy into the platform and actually support it. So, we're just happy to be here. We're happy to support. Our Fantasy Rugby knowledge is very limited to the sense that we know a lot about South African rugby and New Zealand rugby, and then after that it used to be we're going to pick today, now we'll just pick up someone from the Western Force or the Sunwolves and we'll fill in the teams from there. But we just love playing, we love the head-to-heads, and we love the banter that goes along with it.
Yeah, that's excellent. Fair play to you. I'm not sure I'd even fill up the tank of anyone's one of my mates' cars, but yeah, paying for flights, that's next level. Hey, so that was the formal. Have you got any dirt that you want to dig on the lads, Hayes?
There's a lot. I think we've got a limited time to run through everything. But if we can maybe get some form of communication, there's a lot of explicit videos and photos that not even our wives have seen. So there's a lot. So some of it you can even leverage a trade with. So there's a few.
And so that kind of goes hand in hand. I think you discussed there was an interesting clause in your B&B league contract on entry. What was the exit clause? What was the only way that you could actually leave the league?
Okay, so most of us, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the league, the series about the NFL fantasy. So most of us actually watched that during our uni time. And we decided when we started this fantasy league, we're going to make it a domination league. And basically what that means is the only way you leave is by death. So that is it. We in it for the long run.
There's a lot of incentives there. And there's a lot of incentives for your partners.
We've had a couple of friends that marrying and have children and a couple of that to try and get out of the league, but they just didn't stick. They're still in it. They're still in the long run, they said.
Surely that would press them into the league even more. I would be, I'd do anything to get away from my wife.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we won't mention that on the pod, but I guess
it's not in writing.
It's all right. My wife will never.
Nice. Well, welcome, guys. Fantasy Rugby Draft on behalf. We're just absolutely pumped to have such enthusiasm and such knowledge on board as well with guys with fantasy. So really pumped. Looking forward to the season. Six Nations just the start. Super Rugby just around the corner as well. So that will be within the next few days as well. As well as a bit of an organisational change at Fantasy Rugby Draft, we're entering a whole new world as well. So the two things that we had challenges with at the end of last year to be able to get a product off the ground was the running of the season, and that's where Hayes and Laroon, the guys in the B&B, have come in, but also suppliers just keep increasing their costs. So at some stage it was just going to be too much to hold. So this year and this season, starting from Six Nations, Fantasy Rugby Draft is a pay-to-play subscription service. I won't get into too much detail, to be honest here. What I really want to say is it's something that I have been trying to avoid for a long, long time. It's always been there. We've always had suggestions from my managers saying you should turn this into a subscription product if you are struggling. But I've always kind of batted it away with we possibly could work with a B2B relationship. There's something down the line. If we can just float and keep afloat, then we'll keep putting this product each year. But it's become pretty untenable at the end of last year. So we're going to run with the subscription to play. It's $9.95 for each competition. So there's a separate subscription for Six Nations versus Super Rugby versus Prem Rugby. We will kick the tyres on an annual pass in the off-season. Our off-season is June, July. So following the North, that's when the gap in the rugby for domestic is at least. So you get the subscription tossed in with a Manager Pro purchase, and all Manager Pro purchases are now going to be $25, so we just make it across the board. And also, it's a quite timely reminder to if you don't have pro rankings for your draft, the last season's total points is how those players will be ranked, which means that players weren't playing last year, whether it be injury or selection, aren't ranked. So I think a hot topic of discussion with Russ is probably going to be a certain 10 from England, which overnight potentially got bumped up the rankings and got bumped up our rankings as well. But if you looked at the default rankings for Marcus, he's down in the 200s somewhere because he had no points from last year and everything else is ordered alphabetically once you don't have anything. So just a point to note there that when tournaments like Six Nations, where you do have a little bit of turnover, it is quite important to get those pro rankings in there. And there's also team news and things like average points per game which come in, which help you during the season as well.
I just want to say, if you decide to play Six Nations and you're not like Russ and knows like the whole squad out of the top of your head, if you don't have the pro rankings, you might as well just auto draft and that's it.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get anywhere. It's completely different.
Spot on. So just a reminder of the setup, 16 leagues. You can link leagues, as many as you want, and you play in promotion relegation leagues. The default option that we recommend for Six Nations is doing a 15-man starting lineup and 4 bench spots with Fox scoring. So that's if you're creating a league, that's what it will be by default, but you can toggle some of those things depending on your own commissioner and your league preference. Right, Russ, where should we start? Should we get into? Let's start with your home country.
Yeah, let's start with England. It's probably as good a place to start than any. I mean, England have had some interesting injury news this week. Obviously, Owen Farrell now being ruled out for the entire tournament. But as far as like FRD goes, Farrell would be somebody you would only look to pick because of his goal kicking prowess. He doesn't tend to score very highly in yards gained and meets the carry and stuff like that. So, you know, when you're looking at fly halves for your team, you need someone who's going to create, but also kick goals. And, you know, with that in mind, you mentioned about Marcus Smith being down in the 200s. That guy's an absolute wizard, and he likes to make line breaks. He likes to carry a little bit straight to the line, which is always going to sort of accumulate yards and meters. But he's also going to end up kicking goals now as well, which he wouldn't have done had Farrell had been available. So that might have been an interesting FRD conundrum with regards to who you pick, because if you've got both those guys, you know, you probably think that Farrell as a fly half would be listed as a fly half and playing 12, as opposed to Smith being a genuine 10. The other one from an England perspective would be Johnny May. Johnny May not being around now obviously opens the door for somebody else. He's definitely not available for Scotland, and likely he miss more of the Six Nations after that. So, you know, England in their squad have got the likes of Hassel Collins, Joe Marchant. I think will get quite a good run in the team this Six Nations, depending on what Eddie Jones decides to do. So it could be that Joe Marchant ends up playing outside Henry at 13, or where Eddie Jones has picked him previously on the wing. So there's lots of interesting conundrums. The other one that I would definitely look to pick if I was as and when I'm going to be drafting is Freddie Stewart. I think that Freddie Stewart has been a revelation. I don't know what you guys thought in the autumn when South Africa played against England. And one thing England have lacked since Mike Brown probably is that dominant fullback in the air. They tried Elliot Daly and Watson and a number of players, and England have been quite soft under that high ball. And you certainly, you know, in the World Cup final for one, certainly exploited that.
Russ, so do you really want our opinion on Freddie Stewart? He was absolutely killing us. He was just killing us.
He's an incredible player, and the agility and athleticism he can show for 6'5" is quite phenomenal. And he showed in the autumn he had a bit of an eye for the try line as well. So I think he could be quite high on the FRD manager's list, Bruce.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting one. So there are a lot of young, exciting. You take Johnny May out, and if you take Owen Farrell out, you got a pretty green-looking backline there in a lot of aspects. And I think Tuolangi's number. So yeah, so how do you think it actually might shake out, inside to out?
So personally, I think he'll start with Youngs and it'll be Smith. I think he'll play Henry Slade at 12. Yep. There's been a lot of talk about Mar coming in and playing a similar role to what Esterhuizen does at Quins, with the sort of crash ball centre. But I think Eddie Jones will stick to his guns and he'll put Henry Slade at 12 to act as that second distributor, a bit like Owen Farrell did when he had Ford and Farrell. Now it might be Smith and Slade. I think he'll probably pick Marchant at 13, given the fact that Marchant's got international experience already. The other sort of centres that he's got there, Northmore Another Atkinson are fairly inexperienced, which means that it leaves room for the likes of Max Malins, Jack Knoll and Freddie Stewart to start in the back three. That's how I think it will play out. Obviously, he's got other options there with the likes of Hassel Collins, George Furbank, Tommy Freeman, but I think he'll put Jack Knoll straight back in.
Yeah, he likes Jack, doesn't he? Yep.
He really does, and he gets through a lot of work across the pitch, not just your stereotypical like Johnny May does. Johnny May stays on the wing and finishes tries and stays out there. Both Malins and Knoll like to involve.
Yep.
I think a lot of it. If you've got Marchant, Knoll, Malin, Stewart, the numbers on their backs don't really mean anything because you're ultimately just 5 players in a field position that can operate anywhere, as opposed to the traditional 12 through to 15.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's fair. And we've all seen how Johnny May goes trying to pack down on the loose. It's always comical. I think Jack Knoll can probably do a little bit of a better impression of that. So let's go in a little bit. Loose forward trio, that's always pretty hotly contested. Some interesting selections there. One of the guys that destroyed New Zealand not there. So what do we think with that back three? Where's the points coming from?
Well, Alex Dombrandt will be right in there. I think having with Marcus Smith being the 10, he will be a bit of a foot blanket for Marcus Smith as well, back on the inside. Because Harlequins do so well with that sort of almost a flying V formation with Smith with Esterhazy one side and Dombrandt the other. It's really hard. It's really difficult to defend. So Dombrandt on the inside, I think he'll pick Tom Curry at 7, especially now Underhill is injured or is not considered. He got injured in European weekend again, so the likelihood is we won't see him in the Six Nations. And Courtney Laws more likely than not should he be fit. And I would, depending on what Courtney Laws was listed as under the draft. If he's listed as a lock, it could be a really interesting.
Courtney Laws,
because he'll be spending a lot of time in the loose.
He's indeed listed as a lock, and do you think he'll be wearing the captaincy armband now as well, seeing that Owen Farrell is out, giving him a full 80 minutes as a lock? That'll be good points.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just something on Courtney Laws. I think he's actually injured.
Well, Courtney Laws is in the return to play protocol from a concussion the week before. So he's just being monitored this week. But the fact that Eddie Jones made him captain or discussed him being captain when he picked the squad and when he was talking over the weekend makes me think that it's a formality that he'll be back for Scotland.
All right, makes sense.
Yeah, there's a good little advantage to make. What about the type 5? Aside from Courtney, who's not really in the type 5.
Well, it'll be a Toji. Johnny Hill is now injured. So I wouldn't be surprised, and this might be a little left field. He called Nick Ezekwe up in place of Johnny Hill. Now, he already had Charlie Ewels in the squad, and he quite likes Charlie Ewels. Personally, I don't rate him at all. But Eddie Jones always seems to pick him in the squad, and he likes to have that big ballast of a sort of a larger second row next to Maulover Toji. But it could be Ewels. I'd like it to be Ezekwe, and if it is Ezekwe, and he is a big lump, it could mean that Laws either slots back in to second row, or Ezekwe plays at 6, or they mix it about a bit. Again, like numbers on backs doesn't really mean too much to Eddie Jones, I don't think. I'd always be careful with picking Maulover Toji in the FRD, only because he tends to play very much on the edge and does give away a fair amount of penalties. So that could impact Eddie Trust. Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in the front row, England's front row are always strong, but they do tend to give away a lot of penalties, especially against the big South African, whatever they call them when they come off the bench, the bomb squad or whatever. But for me, now that Marler is out with COVID, I see it likely being a front row of Sinclair with Cow and Dickey starting, and likely Bevan Rod to start in the loose head. That's what I think may well happen.
Yes.
Ross, do you think Ellis Gaines might play a role coming off the bench? He is a very mobile, running guy. Would he be up in your fantasy pick?
Well, the front rows will be all grouped together, won't they? As far as
you can have a couple of options.
As far as the scoring goes, so you can have, but we can choose individual. We can play individual front rows as well. Then he's definitely somebody who makes an impact off the bench, and he does carry well. So far as meters per carry or meters carried goes, and he also has a bit of a nose for the try line, doesn't he? So I think that Ellis Genge could provide a bit of a lower down draft pick, depending on running your league.
So Russ, you've got the option of 11 players, which includes a front row, and then the 15 players which we recommend for the Six Nations, that you pick individual props and hookers.
I think that's a great idea, and when you're looking at that, being able to chop into your front row, especially if we're in the 16 leagues, is what they are. If you end up with the Italian, for instance, because you haven't drafted one quicker.
It's late.
Then you're almost. I mean, I remember last season I was in a 16 league, and there were times I didn't bother with the front row because I'd rather have 0 points than minus points.
Yep, it's all tactical, right? It's everything is about what is the value at that point in your pick, and you may not need to have a front row if you can have two studs at the turn type thing. Some people reach and get that Italian one way too early than it should. Anything more from England, apart from some pretty outstanding haircuts going to be in that back line, starting with Marcus Smith? Now, I'm just coming from a point of jealousy, I guess, but gee, that guy just impresses me.
Me too, Bruce.
Mine's by choice, Russ. Mine's by choice, but...
this is why I'm wearing a hat, mate. It's cold in England at the moment.
Yeah, I lost mine in the 80s. So I guess let's go on to Ireland. So where do we think some pretty seasoned campaigners, I guess, are probably going to still be floating around? So what's your take on them?
Ireland are always a dangerous team, and they had a pretty average Six Nations last season by their own standards. They're littered with really, really, really very good players. I mean, you think of how Jordan Lama for the scene a couple of years ago, or probably 3 or 4 years ago now, and he doesn't even really get anymore. And it's likely Hugo Keenan that will start at fullback. The centres will be 2 from Hedor and Aki and what's the name of the other lad that I can't remember? Ringrose. So I think it will likely be and Henshaw, depending on which way they go with Ringrose off the bench. Sexton will always score you points. They don't appear to be moving on from Sexton as their starting flight half anytime soon. They've got Mike Lowry, who's due to sort of step into his shoes, but I don't think he's ready yet. Keith Earls, evergreen Keith Earls, seems to continually score points. And from a forwards perspective, the likes of Tyke Byrne at lock forces a lot of turnovers. And then you've got Tyke Furlong and Caelan Doris, who I think will have a big impact in this year's Six Nations. Watching him for Leinster, he's been really, really good. So I've been really impressed with Caelan Doris.
Yeah, Tyke Burns are a good flag. Yeah, she scored more points than Hugo Keenan last year. But yeah, those guys were in the top 15 as well. They were two good stars.
The other guy that I wanted to ask you about, Russ, is the hooker. Do you think they'll go with Ronan Kelleher?
I would have thought they would do, but Rob Herring, he's been around a little while. He's a little bit older. I think they'll probably end up with Kelleher and then Herring off the bench, depending on how they want to play it. They know what Herring can do. As I say, he's been around a long time. But personally, I would go with Kelleher. More exciting, definitely.
Yeah.
And how do their fixtures stack up? Sorry to land you on that one. So, what are their they've got some tough away fixtures, or have they got the big guys at home? Big guys, I guess there's quite a few competitions.
So as far as fixtures go, Ireland have got Wales at home in round one. They travel to France in round two, which is, that's the toughest place to go in this Six Nations, which we just alluded to a second ago. They are at home to Italy, then they come to England, and then in the final round they entertain Scotland. So from an Irish perspective, they've arguably got the two toughest fixtures of the tournament for them away from home. So from an FRD points perspective, when they play at home, it could be a good ploy. Some of your Irish players, but the England-Ireland game will be tight, and I think that that one could potentially go away. It all depends how England start against Scotland as to how they progress, I think. But I don't give Ireland much chance in France.
Tough fixture.
I don't give anybody much chance in France this tournament.
Not even England.
I mean, no, not even England. I think France are on an absolutely different level to everyone else in the tournament. And England play France away in round 5, and that could be, on that Saturday evening, it could be a Six Nations decider.
Yeah, it'll probably be a final.
To be. Yeah, but and I mean to say they're on a different level to everyone else at the moment. France is the Dell as well now.
Yeah, very good, Hayes.
Hayes, do you want to sing us a solo? Or what are you trying to do here?
Well, when he was speaking about France, I thought the love song might do the thing, because it sounds. I thought it was English.
Nice.
But yeah, France are far and away the favourites for me. I don't want to segue too quickly there, Bruce, but I feel like I've already just jumped right onto France. I mean, they have got stars everywhere, and it's almost hard to know at this point in time exactly which way they're going to go. In the autumn, Villiers I thought was superb. You've got Penaud. I assume they're going to go Villiers and Penaud with the fullback will be, what's his name? Probably Dula, but it could be the other guy that played in the autumn who was unbelievable, whose name escapes me. The likes of Dupont, Untamak, they're almost. Thomas Ramos was the guy who played with them, and he was brilliant. So they've got back three options. If you're going to start drafting French back three players, it might be a good idea to look at handcuffing some of these guys, because the likes of Ramos. If you can handcuff Ramos and Dupont and Benjamin is it? Oh, I've forgotten his name. Can't remember his name. Siran. That's right. The back row guys are unbelievable. Aldrit has been phenomenal in the French league this season. You've got Kamara and Cameron Wookie. You've got it's just everywhere. It's just littered with absolute stars, and you have to be careful, I think, from a draft perspective with some of these French players, because there are so many good ones, I don't know which way they're going to go, and it'll be interesting to see when they pick their first squad. And the first squad is to play Italy at home. They might experiment, which will throw some people off the scent, I think.
Russ, I've got a question for you. With it is around Ntima. Do you think they'll slot him in at 12? And what is the plan with Jaminet?
It's hard to know, because it's a bit like the English conundrum that they had before Farrell was injured. If they decide to play Jaminet and Fiku at 12, then Fiku and Ntamak at 12, then Fiku will probably slot in at 13. For me, Fiku's probably been France's star player for the last 18 months, and when you think about Dupont, who gets all of the plaudits, I don't think Fiku gets anywhere near as much credit as he should do. If they decide to pick Ntamak at 10, then it will be Fiku on the inside and likely Jules Favre, the outside centre. And personally, I think they'll play Ntamak at 10, especially against Italy. I think they'll open his account and they'll get him rolling, and they can use Jaminet off the bench to mix things up if they need to.
Nice. And
okay, I think that's an important from a fancy perspective.
Yeah, hugely important. Trying to figure that out. It is one of those decisions you're going to have to make, and Russ alluded to it as well. How much is France going to experiment in that first match, and how much does that count for getting one win out of 6? If you pick the right player that might be a little bit of a flyer, then it's a really important way to get set off. I think we could probably spend most of this podcast talking about Dupont's yellow dressing gown. Has anyone seen that photo, that recent one? That was an absolute blinder.
No, I haven't. No.
If you haven't seen it, and maybe we'll use it as a thumbnail for this podcast. Goodness gracious me. The French just keep Frenching.
Mr. Wild and the Pond.
I'll definitely Google it.
It's the guy. Yeah, it's one of those ones where I'm just way too famous and way too French. It's really good. Really good. Right, anything more on France?
Sorry, France. Are we moving on to Italy?
Yeah, let's go to Italy. I think we've covered France. I think you could probably slot in 1 through 15.
Just one thing before we move to Italy. France front row. I think they've actually made a hell of a lot of points last season.
Yeah. Their scrum was so dominant in our games. They just keep churning off these props that are absolutely massive. I mean, Demba Bamba, who has been a great find. Buden, who's a bit smaller. He's more in the sort of the I was trying to think, sort of the Ellis Genge mould. He's actually only like Budenhen's Bougerie, who's the hooker. And then you've got the likes of, I'm just going through the squad now, Jerome Ray, and the big guy, which is Aldegheri. And I think that they'll probably go with Bemba and Aldegheri. They're 124k and 119k each.
Jesus. Yep.
And three
big boys.
Yeah, they move around the.
Yeah, that's the difference. That's the difference.
And that's the point I was trying to make earlier, is that with 20 minutes to go, you used to be able to just gas France out of the game. You used to be able to run around the pitch, and the forwards would just blow up, and they low fitness. And if you were in a game with France, the last 20 minutes is where you'd win. That is no longer the case. I mean, if anything, they are now stronger in the last 20 minutes. You see that game against the All Blacks in the autumn. They were phenomenal in that 20 minutes. So I think that's something to be wary of.
Yep, absolutely. So conscious of time, got you guys on the clock. So why don't we stick with go with Scotland and then Wales and then Italy to round it out.
Okay, so Wales. Wales are always an odd team, and Pivac is starting to put his mark on the team. He's brought back of Alex Cuthbert, which I find slightly odd. But if I was going to pick a couple of players to look out for, maybe for your draft, I think you need to really consider someone like Tane Basham, who was excellent in the autumn, got a lot of turnovers, and will continue to do so. I think if you're going to go for a Welsh fly half, then obviously Bigger and Sheedy, you're going to need to handcuff those. My strategy would be whichever starting fly half I decide to go for early doors, depending on what round I go for, it will be just handcuffing the fly half in that team. I know it's an old tactic. I think, especially in Six Nations, it's one you really need to be on. And then Reece Samet and Josh Adams. I mean, Josh Adams is just a point scoring machine. He scores try fun, and he always seems to be in the right place at the right time. He's very sort of 2013 Chris Ashton like, where he's always there to dot the ball down. Like wherever the try is across the try line, it always seems to be him that's dotting it down for Wales. And I think he is very much a points machine.
Yeah, they're always that back three of Wales, regardless of how the type 5 or the team's actually travelling, always seems to pick up pretty handy fantasy rugby draft points.
Yeah, and again, a bit like France, it'll be interesting to see which way they go against Ireland, because Basham at 1 metre 82 and 94 kilograms. Ellis Jenkins is 1 metre 85 and 101. Wainwright, who was also decent, was 188, 1 metre 88 and 106 kilograms. It'll be interesting to see whether there's Moriarty in there as a bit of ballast, to carry harder. Those guys, whilst they're quick and they get around the park, they tend not to be big ball carriers. And what Wales they have missed that sort of Faletau style strong ball carrier. So it'll be interesting to see who they actually pick at 8.
Yeah, really interesting. All right, let's wrap up Wales. Is there anyone else in the top 5 or interchange that we need to think of?
Not really. Wales have struggled in the scrum recently. The likes of Rhys Carre, Leon Brown, Wyn Jones was obviously a Lion, but they did struggle in the autumn. And without the sort of leadership of Alan Wynne, they looked a little bit lightweight and they lacked a bit of aggression. And for what Alan Wyn Jones maybe lacks in mobility and the Maro Itoje or the Tyg Burn style lock, he makes up for aggression and leadership, and he drags people with him. So it's something that the Wales really need to be mindful of.
Yeah, nice. Interesting to see how they travel. As you mentioned, Alan Wyn Jones, such a figurehead for that team, such a Six Nations kind of figure. Be interesting to see how that they go without him. I guess Scotland now. What are we thinking there? Some interesting players in there.
Well, there is, and Scotland have been on the up for a a couple of years now, and every year you think this could, Scotland really could do something here.
Like
you look throughout the Scottish team. Well, that's an interesting comparison. So, I use Chris Harris as an example. He was superb for the Lions. He is brilliant with Mark Atkinson in the Premiership. As that they are a stereotypical stalwart Premiership centre partnership. They are no frills, but they are really, really efficient. Stuart Hogg will always score points.
Heard of him?
Teams kick to Scotland. He tends to run back. He doesn't kick the ball a lot. Finn Russell, he's mercurial, isn't he? He's a bit of a maverick. The player. Not everyone's always on the same page as Finn Russell, but that often works in their favour. If he doesn't know what he's going to do, then how can the opposition? Matt Fagerson at number 8, I really like. I think he's a really good player, and obviously Duan van der Merwe, who, if he plays, and there was rumours of him being injured and being a next Saturday, would be somebody I'd be looking to pick up.
No, he does not kick.
They're going to look to get him involved.
He just runs it straight.
He does not. Yeah, absolutely. But Scotland are a really interesting proposition. Really interesting.
Yeah. What about this? How do they travel in the Type 5? Is there much change there from last season?
Not particularly. So Johnny Gray is in. Scott Cummings could well partner him in the lock position. They've got Scat Skinner there from Exeter as well, who can play lock and 6, who will probably be a replacement option. For the front row, Rory Sutherland, WP Nell, although WP is getting on a little bit now, he's 35. Pierre Schumann and Javan Sebastian are in there. I think that Xander Fagerson will probably start with Sutherland. Jamie Batty might well get a look in as well. So there isn't a lot of change. They've picked a sail hooker, Ewan Ashman, but I don't think he will end up starting. I think it's likely that McInally will be the owns that shirt from the start.
And Hamish Watson, how much do you think you'll play an integral part for the possible success for the Scotland team?
He's brilliant, and he's tenacious, and he's strong. He gets over the ball well, and he is a bit of a talisman for Scotland now. I think they look to him when things maybe aren't going their way. And while some people might be a bit lightweight and underpowered, I think, as far as out-and-out sevens go, he's right up there with some of the best in the world. From an FRD perspective, I worry about a lot of the Scotland forwards in a points perspective, especially for carrying. It would be Watson would be the only one that I'd probably pick, just for the ability to get turnovers.
And because of the mullet.
Great.
Yeah, the mullet, you cannot the mullet aside.
It's delicious.
Speaking of mullets, let's go to the Italian team, which is coloured with glorious haircuts themselves. So who do we think? There's probably only going to be a handful of folks, right?
Isn't the Italians just a bye weekend for most teams?
That's where fantasy rugby's great, right? Because there's some players that you need to really pick up and pay attention to that were in the top 15.
Well, yeah, correct. So, I think as far as Italy goes, so from an FRD perspective, first of all, you really need to be looking at your. He was good last season, and he was a real shiner for Italy. So, obviously with his pure Italian bloodline, he is something you need to look at picking up. Bram Stein, again, another real Italian pizza eating guy. He's an absolute unit, but he is impressed. Whenever I've seen him play, I've been really impressed with him. He always goes forward. He's strong. He's a strong ball carrier, and he'll be somebody that Italy go to a lot in the loose, carrying that first up ball, probably directly off 9. As will Sebastian Negri. They'll both do a lot of work carrying directly off, imagine. It's probable that they will start with Garbisi out half. It wouldn't be my choice to pick. You know, if you're having to pick Garbisi as your starting 10, you're going to be in a bit of trouble. So, you know, my advice from an FRD route would be to pick up your skill positions early, so you're not having to switch around and pick Garbisi or any of the sort of backup fly halves off the bench once people start to draft those.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with him. It's that kind of he's a warm body at 10 basically for your team, but you know he's there. He does score points, but if you want, you know, at what cost? Because you're probably someone's gonna reach for him quite high in that kind of 1 or 2 round when you could be getting, say, a Doolin or an outside back that's probably going to score. It could be a difference maker for you come the end. So yeah, some real tough decisions.
Yeah, there really is. And draft strategy, the same in any draft, the same as the draft of years gone by, is that you need to go in with a decent strategy. You need to have a plan and also a backup plan when somebody takes the player you're looking at next.
Yeah.
You know, looking at your handcuffs. Like you said right at the start, Bruce, your ranks, getting people in there, because you know Marcus Smith ranked all the way down in the 200s because he hasn't scored any Six Nations points. You know, I can't imagine anyone forget about him, but you know, I would say that he will be going in the first round of every draft. It's likely that Untamak, Marcus Smith, probably Sexton, maybe bigger would be your first 6 picks off the board.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
So that, you know, it'll be an interesting to see when you do your draft analysis as to where people are going.
So one question that I had that last year, so when we got COVID cancellations, we just have to remove the match. There's no way of extending the season or anything like that. What impact do you think this year that might have, if any? It's hard to predict, but things like, I don't know, are France more likely to get one of their games scuppered than anyone else?
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, looking at it now, the way that testing is now, and the way that individuals can carry out the lateral flow testing, and the fact that people only potentially, you know, in England, and they have to isolate for 5 days or until for a negative test. I think we're that far forward now in regards to that it shouldn't be a problem. And you know, squads, whilst not in really COVID stringent bubbles, I think that they're far more aware of what they should and shouldn't be doing. So I don't see it being too much of a problem this year. We can't say it won't happen, but I'm thinking it's unlikely this time around.
Okay, all right. So is there anything else from a player perspective that we think we should touch on before we put a bow on it?
I don't think so. I think obviously everybody needs to sign up. I think it's fantastic that FRD is back, and even the fee to get involved, if that enables you to keep the game going and to make it a future proposition, then everybody should absolutely get on board with that. I don't think you have any problems, because everybody loved the game, everybody the platform, and you know, I'm an American football fan as well, and one of the best things about, you know, early season is drafting and going head to head against people where you can't have the same players. I think it's brilliant, and yeah, I just hope that plenty of people get on board and enjoy it.
Thanks, Russ. Very kind words. Appreciate it. That's probably enough for us now. So if you want to follow us on Twitter, it's Fantasy Rugby Draft. That's Fantasy RUG Draft. Join up at fantasyrugbydraft.com. Get your league created and at least get that draft date in your calendar. As Russ alluded to, it's better to do it in person. We wanted to launch before a weekend, so you could find a pub somewhere, and you can do it online. You can do it offline as well. But go deep into the preseason. We had a lot of drafts come off the board Wednesday and Thursday before the kickoff of the first weekend. So if you can do it in person, great. If you can't, online, perfect. Thanks, Roux and Gys. Again, just a personal big welcome. Good to have you guys on board, and look for future down the road.
We're happy to be here, Bruce. Thanks for having us, and we look forward to the next podcast where we sit down with you and tell us about the amazing things that we don't know about Six Nations and the stuff that we have to learn.
Oh yeah, maybe we should do a middle of a Six Nations update to see where we are, see where our predictions.
100%.
Kind of see the players.
And now England must just go to France and beat them.
I mean, if it all comes down to England and France for a Grand Slam and the top, that would be perfect.
Well, you didn't give England one chance earlier.
I didn't, but it's the hope that kills you.
Exactly.
Nice one.
And everyone loves it. Oh,
yeah, absolutely. All right, cheers, guys. No, appreciate the time. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson.
What a bust here by Christian Cullen. Plenty of support, and what a dummy!